to come join us, and then we'll start. Welcome everyone to our webinar on how to ace your next tech job interview. So we have today Leonika Hannan with us. She was formerly the head of HR at NewsCred and is currently working as an HR consultant for tech startup. She's also the co-founder and CEO of tukitaki.xyz, which is one of Bangladesh's fastest growing marketplace e-commerce business. She has extensive experience in building tech teams, conducting technical recruitments, and managing stakeholders from all over the world. With Leonika, we have Saim. Saim is the CEO of Airwork, and I'm Rashid. I'm the CTO of Airwork. Saim was the founder of Alpha, which is one of the largest catering brands of the country. And I have been working with machine learning, AI, and other technologies for over 8 years. With that being said, I'd invite Saim to kind of take the conversation forward.
Hi, guys. I won't take much of your time. Basically, we're just getting into the flow of the event. Before we started, we just wanted to tell you more about what Airwork is. So essentially, we are an invite-only tech talent marketplace. We are building that bridge that will connect Bangladeshi talents with remote jobs, full-time remote jobs from all over the world. Essentially, it's just that. And what we're an exclusive invite-only, sort of like a club where you can access part-time and full-time jobs. We have just launched our beta version in March 26th. As we build our platform out, we plan on building a lot of the other tools that will sort of facilitate a complete remote team management here in Bangladesh. Our journey so far has been very humble. We were the champions of DataBird Launchpad last year. We're part of Grameenphone Accelerator. In January, we got registered in the US. And right now we're doing our pre-seed fundraising. Last month, we placed 3 talents in 3 New York-based, separate 3 New York-based and 1 Georgia-based startup. We have currently 30 job placements in our hand, but we are swamped with work, basically. So it just goes to show that there is a demand out there for people, for Bangladeshi talents. People all over the world are looking for us, but there's no platform that sort of connects us. So in order to become part of Airwork, it's very simple. You need to have an invite code because we're keeping the quality in check for the time being. We do a screening. There's a communication test and interviews followed by coding and all of that. Then you become a member. After that, you can access the platform and you are then recommended to the client by us. So just to get started, you can just go to airwork.com/request. And to summarize, if you just want to think about us, think of us as someone who is a talent coach. Just like how a coach wants to see his or her talents do well on the field, we want our talents to do well professionally and personally. So that's all from us. We don't want to take too much of your time today because today is not about Airwork. It's about knowing how to ace a tech job interview and followed by a placement. So I'll just give the floor to Rashid now, and then we can go ahead with Leonika Apu's conversation.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much, Leonika Apu, for giving us the time. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of dive into the nitty-gritty of technical recruitment. Would you kind of begin with your journey into HR profession and how you came to be especially in technology recruitment sector?
Yes, absolutely. And Rashid, Saim, thank you so much for having me. I was just so excited to come across Airwork. And, I told you guys and just everyone, thank you for joining. The Airwork is just really here at a very perfect time where there really is a huge demand from people all over the world, and it's specifically because of the pandemic, with the familiarization over the last 2 years with remote working. It's just how life is going to proceed from now on in the work culture, in the workplace. So this is just the perfect platform, and I highly encourage all of you to join and be part of this amazing network. So with that, thank you again for having me, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about my journey. I won't bore you with sort of my work experience. You're welcome to look at that on LinkedIn. I think the more interesting story is sort of how I ended up being in HR. So I am a third culture kid, also called TCKs. If you don't know what that is usually children who have a passport to one country, were born in a different country to the passport they hold, and they grew up in a completely different country to the passport they hold and the country they were born, right? So I have, from the time I was born to the time I graduated, I had already lived in 5 different countries. I finished my high school at the International School of Beijing in China. After graduation, I lived in 3 more countries. And finally, Bangladesh is the 9th country that I'm living in for the first time, although I hold a passport from this country. So very interesting. I moved here for the first time when I was 27. So what's interesting about TCKs is because you live in so many countries, your survival literally depends on adaptability and sort of observing and knowing people and understanding behaviors and cultures. Those who sort of aren't able to adapt to that kind of lifestyle, that constant traveling and constant change really consumes you, and it takes a toll on you over time. And for the lucky ones like me, who sort of have older siblings who guide you through this process because they've been there, it's a lot smoother. We learn to sort of appreciate the differences in people, really get to know them, and again, embrace the change. It, again, is really part of surviving when you're growing up. So naturally, I found myself pursuing an undergraduate degree in psychology. It's the thing that made most sense to me and was easiest to me, was learning about people and their behaviors. So funny fact about me is that I was really into criminal psychology and understanding deviant behavior. I did my high school thesis on criminals that were serial killers. So by the time I got into sort of my undergraduate program, my parents were starting to get really worried, and they were like, you can do psychology, but please try to not go into this really dangerous profession of criminal psychology. So, I did my degree, and then I found myself working for a year before I did my master's. I think at that point, really, I realized that I love psychology, but it's not a transferable skill. My aim was always to move around and have that mobility. And when I graduated in 2004, there weren't really that many professions that require psychology. So I looked for the next best thing, what was closest to psychology, and that was business. And in business, that was human resources. So I completed my master's from the UK campus of Webster University, fell in love with HR, and here I am.
All right. And thank you, Opus. That's a very interesting sort of journey. Simon, I would invite Simon to take forward the conversation with.
All right. So, Leonika, today's conversation is about how the next generation, or we can sort of get to our dream tech job, right? So if we define it as a goal and sort of back calculate the steps we have to take, let's start from the beginning and do a chronological order. So what do you think? What are the skills today's talents should be focused on? How can they prep themselves to sort of for the future?
Sure. So if we're specifically looking at skill set, part of course, if you're a software engineer, your technical skill set will be very important. People sort of take 2 routes here, engineers. Either one is that, they'll be very focused on one technology, and they'll sort of build their career on that. Or there will be others who sort of try different technologies and, can become full stack and sort of take a path of that direction. There's also the other part is when you start getting more seniors, there's a path of becoming an engineering manager, which means you're managing other engineers and you're really needing to focus on people skills as well. Or you can sort of go towards like architect or staff engineer, in which case you can remain more technical and you don't have to think about sort of the people aspect. So in terms of skills, like, you know, ladies and gentlemen, like technical skills, that's on you guys. You know, you should pick skills that you're passionate about and that you want to work with, and you can always find companies that align with that. I think the part that like maybe often gets overlooked is the more softer skills, which have really become, if you're especially looking for remote positions, if you're working with, say, looking for North American companies or European companies to work with, the soft skills are more in terms of communication, teamwork, and more recently, even the ability to work remotely is a very, very important skills that they're looking for. I think also being able to debate without getting aggressive, and being able to stand your ground and defend your decision is a really important skill that engineers need to have. I think oftentimes, because English is not everyone's first language here, you see a lot of people just backing out of sort of situations because, you know, you may not have the vocabulary or you don't want to sort of be aggressive with the wrong words. But what I've really seen, especially with North American companies, if you're not able to stand your ground, that in fact is usually worse and just shows, it just sort of indicates that you're not able to get the job done, or you don't know why you've done something the way you've done it. So don't let language be a barrier. Figure out, practice how you can at least, like at the very minimum, be able to defend your position.
Fair enough. All right, Rashid, over to you. You're muted, I think.
Thank you, Apu. You have talked a bit about the soft skill. How about the CGPA or other professional certificate, like, you know, certified Scrum certification or PMP certification? How much value do those put in the resumes?
Yeah, so I mean, this really depends on the company. I, for example, give no value to the CGPA. Absolutely none. I think that, you know, very smart people are often very under challenged at school, and that the way that like an education program is designed is not always taking into account like really genius or really smart, intelligent people. So I even disregard a bachelor's degree. One of the smartest engineers I have ever met was a diploma holder, and had he been screened out just because he had a diploma, like at NewsCred, we would have suffered intensely. He's just so incredibly smart, but you know, the regular education line was just not for him. But with that said, in Bangladesh, a lot of companies place heavy emphasis on CGPA, whereas in North American and perhaps European companies, they don't even really ask you to add the CGPA at this point. I think you just say what your degree is, and that's that. So depending on the company you're applying to, you know, make sure you include that information. Certifications are the same way. Some people will require it. I don't really. I think that, say, for example, if you have no experience doing Scrum, your CSM like certification is meaningless to me, because that Scrum is very much an activity you have to do and understand like what the pain points are. So it's great if you have the certification. It won't disfavor you, but for a lot, it's not going to be totally wow them away either, unless it's paired with that experience.
All right. So Apu, what do you think, like, so now that we are more into skills and all of that, what do you think as a recruiter, what are some of the things that you really appreciate, and what are some of the things that you hate in a candidate? Not hate, I would say. As a recruiter, you shouldn't be hating people, but so what are some of the absolute no's as well?
Yeah, so if I start with the no's, I think, you know, one really important thing is, so as technical recruiters, most of us don't come from a technical background. So a lot of what we've learned is on the job. But we're also not people who don't know anything, right? And I think that's the sort of fine balance with candidates, is when they speak to technical recruiters, like, they're unintelligent or don't have the knowledge to have that conversation, that really like rocks the boat with us, because I mean, we're in that position right now because, you know, we've gone through an interview process as well ourselves, which demonstrates that, you know, we know how to recruit software engineers. So I think that balance of like, you don't want to be overly technical, but you also don't want to be condescending. So that's a no. Don't go into either or. Being too technical will bore us. We won't know what you're talking about. At the same time, don't say too little where, you know, you're being on the verge of being rude with us. The other things are, don't ever interrupt during an interview. That's a big no for any level of the recruitment process, and definitely sort of decreases your ability to move forward, because listening is an important part of being a team player. So we need to know that you're listening to us at every stage, and that's demonstrated when we're asking questions. So take the time to listen, pause, show that you've understood, and then answer. And I think for me personally, one other thing that I really don't like is if you don't know the answer to a question, don't try to wing it, because I know the answer to the question. So and if I know that you don't know, it just puts you in an awkward position, right? It's better to say, I don't know the answer, but my best educated guess is, and sort of take it from there. So those are sort of my personal ones. And I know that a lot of technical recruiters, or even any recruiter, has shared with me that these really sort of bug them during interviews. Some plus things to do with recruiters is always to respond to them quickly. You know, if they've sent you an email or if they're sourcing you, make sure you respond quickly, and always be super polite. Say thank you after interviews. That's really important. Everybody likes to be appreciated. So make sure you praise them, not in the way that you're being, again, condescending, but really, you know, you can say something like, I've really appreciated, you know, how quickly you've been moving me through the pipeline. I know you've got a lot of work. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate that. I think that's a great way to bias a recruiter, by the way, right? And you should always do that as much as you can. Internal references really help. It's, of course, definitely not the only way that people will recruit, but if somebody in the company can vouch for you and can say and give you a strong backing, it definitely works in your favor. And yeah, I think in terms of the positive things, out of all of these things, I think having an internal reference is probably what will sway it in your favor.
All right. So when it comes to applying, do you think we should, like, what should an ideal resume or a CV should look like? Should it be really long or really short to the point, or really fancy with some, I see a lot of people put a lot of graphics these days. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So there's an interesting statistic that's been published where a recruiter only gives a resume 8 seconds before they decide whether they want to move forward with it or regret it. So I've actually, after reading that, I've timed myself. I take about 15 seconds to make a decision, which isn't a lot of time if you think about it. But just being realistic, that is the time that I give. So with the resume, if I speak first about the format, different countries have different formats, and it's really important to change your resume according to that standard. Some people will want to see education first. Some people will want to see job experience first. So understand what those country requirements are before you apply. And just on that note, I think one of the biggest mistakes I sort of really see is that people send the same resume to every company that they're applying to. And it just doesn't work that way. Like, you really need to spend time, and, Sam, we can get into that a bit more later, but you really need to spend time changing that resume according to the job description and making sure it fits. So don't just do like a one resume fits all. It doesn't. But more on that, I think it's really important because there's 3 things that I've seen in Bangladesh. One is a resume, one is a CV, and I've actually received biodatas as well as like job applications, which has been really interesting. So of course, like, let me just explain the difference of the 3. A CV is a curriculum vitae, which means, you have to put all of your experience, all of your education. your sort of entire professional life, every training you've taken, every certification you've gotten, that company wants to see it all. So if they're asking for a CV, give the CV. But most companies will ask for a resume, which means they want a synopsis of the most relevant things to the job that you're applying to. So say, for example, I worked at Gap when I was a student in uni. I don't include that in a resume unless the sales aspect or the retail aspect of working at Gap is relevant for the job that I'm applying to. So I take out all the unnecessary things and I make a small note at the bottom. I might just put the job title and the dates, but I don't go into like, taking a lot of time to explain what that is. So in general, if you have less than sort of 4 years of experience, I'm not willing to look at a resume that's longer than 1 page. Like nobody really has that much to say unless you've got 4+ experience, in which case two pages is the most I'm willing to look at. And I think, again, just to remember, like, recruiters are recruiting for multiple positions across multiple departments. We're reviewing at least 300 resumes a day. So karo kinto time na they're going to sit there and look at 4 or 5 pages for a fresh graduate. This is not happening. So understand which one they're asking for. If they're asking for a resume, don't provide something that's really long. They only want like a 1-pager. The format is, of course, important. And I think in terms of the resume, yeah, I think those are the 2 important things.
All right.
I guess I'll just add one last thing is that I see a lot of personal information on resumes, like date of birth, photos, chest size sometimes. Don't know why, though. So if the company doesn't require that, especially religion too, right? If the company doesn't require you to state that, Bangladesh on but the outside countries are definitely not looking for that information. So if you're applying abroad, do not put in that information at all.
Okay. So you you are hiring for quite a long time, right? So
Sure.
could you guide us through sort of the generic steps involved in hiring software engineers? And most of the time, like, what are the things that catches your eyes in the people who are applying?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question here. And just to preface that, every recruiter sort of has their own style. So I'll be specifically talking about the way that I recruit. So maybe for this next part, audience, you can sort of take the perspective of a technical recruiter. So follow me in my journey as I talk to you about how a requirement comes up to how sort of I select a candidate. So what happens is when a vacancy comes up, a hiring manager, usually the engineering manager, the tech lead, or the CTO, will come to either the talent acquisition manager or directly to the technical recruiter and say, I have this vacancy. And jointly, they will understand what the criteria is that they want to find in the candidate, and they'll write a job description, right? So it's happening together. If the technical recruiter has any questions at this point about the tech requirements, they'll clarify it. So just know that this step is done jointly. So we're already very aware of the type of person that's needed. Job description will say the technical part, but what will also be discussed at this part is the soft skills that are needed, right? So they have to be fluent in English. They have to have amazing technical skills. Oh, I'm thinking they're going to become the tech lead in 2 years' time. So make sure you assess for their leadership skills, right? So these are things that are often not communicated in the job description, but things that we will be assessing you for, right? So once the job description is up on our careers page, we spread the word. We spread the word through LinkedIn. We might put it on different job boards, depending on where we know we've been successful. And we also source candidates, right? So we will actively go on LinkedIn and find candidates that match the profile. So for today, we're only talking about the application process and not the sourcing process, because they're slightly different. So once you see the vacancy, you will want to apply for it. So before you apply, I think, well, actually, let's not talk about what you will do. We'll talk about the steps first. So once you apply for the role, again, hundreds of resumes coming in. I'm a top tech company. I don't have a shortage of talent, tons of people applying. So 15 seconds is what you'll get when I see your application. And at this point, if your resume is messy, if it's hard for me to digest the information at a glance, if there's a lot of italics font, a lot of bold, unnecessary bold, if it's not aesthetically pleasing, most likely I will skip over your resume and I'll move on to the next one very quickly. The onus is on you as a candidate to make it easy for me to read that information, not the other way around. And there are plenty of candidates who are sort of doing that right for me to make it easy. So a really good technical recruiter might put you in the maybe pile and say, I'll come back to you. But many will just say like, nope, this candidate has not made the effort or does not know the industry standards and they're out. So once, say your resume does look really good, I've skimmed it, I've given it that 15 seconds, I'm happy with what I see, I'll put you in a shortlist pile and I'll move on to the next candidate. So I'll review all the initial screenings that I have to do. And say for today, I targeted 100 resumes and I'll have a short list of say 20. So tomorrow or the second part of the day, I'll give a thorough read of the applications that I shortlisted. So now I'll go back and I'll be spending 10 to 15 minutes looking at everything very carefully in your resume. So this means you've met an initial screening. It's aesthetically pleasing. I've done a scan, so I've seen some keywords, but now I will do a proper scan. So a lot of companies use something called an applicant tracking system. And a good example of that is Greenhouse or Smart Recruiters. So what these softwares do is they will provide the most matched resumes at the top. They can do that, or you can choose to say, just leave everything and I'll do the screening myself, right? So at this point, what's important from my side is I sometimes will just do like a Command F function and I'll say, hey, Python, the job description requires Python. I'm going to search how many times they've written Python on their resume, right? Python Ashlo, I'm going to search exactly what they've written. So either I'm going to say yes or no. Yes, they've mentioned it. I see that. Okay. Or they've done it in a project. It meets the criteria. Then I'll go down to the next thing, right? And I will search your resume. And if it at this point has enough of the keywords that I need, that's the first 5 minutes, right? So I'll do a keyword search and then I'll spend the next 10 minutes really like digesting the content of your resume. So what does each line mean? What are you trying to communicate? And then based on that decision, if there's enough of what I see in a match, then I forward it to sort of the second shortlist, which is a phone interview. So the phone interview is a very quick call. It's 10 to 15 minutes. It's a time where I'm really seeing whether you're serious about the role, whether you understood the role. Why have you applied to the role? Why have you applied to this company? And I'm just also trying to get a general vibe from you, right? Like most people are looking for a positive vibe at this point. Will they gel? Would they sort of have the values that I have? And you have a very short time to sort of impress me, right? 15 minutes is not a long time to get, what you need to say across to me, but to be concise, I guess. And of course, fluency, English fluency is a big thing that is assessed at this point. So 15 minutes, if I like what I'm hearing good enough, the next step is to complete a code test. Code tests can happen in multiple ways. People use software like HackerRank, where they give you questions there and sort of come out with an assessment. Companies like NewsCred, we had a very different process. I'm happy to share that. So the code test happens, and then you do a pair programming with a senior engineer on the team where you really have to explain why you did what you did and how you did it. And at this point, there will be a lot of like quality over quantity, clean code assessment. So a lot of things will be assessed at this point. But the pair program is, of course, a lot longer. It takes 1 to 2 hours for somebody to have that conversation with you to understand. But top tech talent will do that. So oftentimes you'll see that our question is very common. Everybody knows our interview question, but it really doesn't matter because you still have to justify what you did during a pair programming. So so after pair programming, if they're happy, if that engineer is happy with how it went, then you usually move on to another round with the engineering manager or the CTO combined. Sometimes at this stage, you also do an interview with a head of HR who will be assessing very strongly your cultural fitness, which is a big part of the interview processes in the last, I'll say, like 5 to 6 years. Do you have the right values that align with our company? So head of HR will be assessing your fitness, and the tech leads will then assess your technical ability. And then finally, you'll either meet a CTO or a CEO, and that will wrap up your interview. If everyone is happy, usually at the end of the interview, everyone gets together and compares notes. And ATSs have a place where you can give your notes, like, yeah, I'd like to work with this person, or no, I wouldn't work with this person, and sort of the explanation defending how that interview went. We compare notes, and if everyone has a positive experience, we move forward with an offer.
Got it. So interview is a very important component of the entire process, right? So how can we do it better? I know you've covered a few, like if you don't know the answer, say, no, I don't know, rather than being overconfident on it. Like, what are some of the other things that we need to look out during an interview?
Yeah, so I mean, and I'll speak about product companies. I think if you're going into an interview with a product company, you need to, before we even go into product, like, I think if you're applying to a company, take a week to really understand what the company's about. Fully digest the content on the website, read everything, every single link that they have, go through the information, look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Glassdoor, see what all the reviews are, understand fully what the company does, what the culture is, because these are things that if you're trying to impress during interview, you will reference during the interview. Like, oh, during Series B, this happened. What exactly was that? You can ask for elaboration. Oh, I read a blog article that the CTO published in architecture on microservices, blah, blah, blah. I'd love to learn more about that, right? So these are things that will impress and show that you've spent a lot of time researching them, which is immediately like a winner, right? For everybody on the interview panel, they'll love you that you've spent the time to sort of research them. So company is a must research. If you're really good, you can research the interviewers. Again, anything to create positive bias is a plus, right? So I know sometimes people come into the interview and they've completely researched me because they're referencing China, they're referencing this degree that I've done, or they're referencing this institution that I worked at. I'm like, oh, this person's, come here to impress me, and I appreciate that effort. I make sure I'm not biased by it, but I appreciate that they spent time trying to understand me and relate to me during the interview, right? So other things, so research is super important. Other things in the, sorry, did you say what else is important during the interview?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other thing I'd say is ask really intelligent questions at the end of the interview. I think a lot of times people ask on each round, like, oh, what's the salary, or what are the working hours, or what's the weekend? These are all things you can talk to your recruiter separately during a first call or a second call. You don't need to ever come to a CTO round or even an engineering manager round and ask these questions. Like, these are very unimpressive questions, right? That you can just even send through an email. You don't need to sort of waste somebody's time asking them these things. So really insightful questions, and these will only come up when you do that proper research on them, right? And of course, if it's a product organization, try to find somebody in the company who can give you inside information on the product, right? So not just what's been published. If you can't find somebody, then read as much as you can about what the mission is, what have they built, what stage are they on, how many engineers are there, or even ask your technical recruiter these questions before you get into the round with your engineering managers, right? Get as much information by the time you get to the tech lead part. That's really important to show that you've done the research and that you can ask intelligent questions and have a meaningful conversation with them at the end, because everybody will give you about 15 minutes. So use those 15 minutes to your advantage by showing that you've done the research. And I think, let's see, is there anything else in the interview? No, that's it. Well, there's a lot, but I think these are the important ones.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. So one key thing we often notice within the industry is that you know companies, they don't really disclose the salary range they are looking at.
Mm.
Uh, uh, Money is a motivating factor, and we a lot of the time engineers decide based on how much increments they're getting or not. So how to approach that and how to sort of negotiate the salaries and other stuff.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, you guys. Like, I mean, it's such a such a sensitive sort of topic. Like, I know I get really put off when people ask me too early in the interview stage, like what the salary is. Um, but I also sometimes I think appreciate when people ask head on and they're honest about it. I think it's really just the way that they approach it really matters. Um, for me, like fresh graduates that talk about salary is a really big turnoff. Like not a fan. I think as a fresh graduate, your first intent should be to look for work and experience. Like salary should be secondary. Just know that if you're getting accepted into a top tech talent, you are going to get paid well. You're not going to get paid like Bisha Dertaka. You're going to get paid well. Leave that salary discussion to the end. More senior engineers, mid-level, completely understand. It is, of course, a primary factor of deciding whether you want to take a job. I generally, I guess, am okay with mid to senior people asking at the very beginning. I know that once somebody is shortlisted, I usually disclose the range to them and say, hey, I've shortlisted you. We've had our initial talk. Here's the salary range. If it's acceptable within your sort of expectation, let's move forward. So I know I do this. I know a lot of people want to keep it to the end, which is very frustrating. Because you've gone through this whole process, and if it's a 40K discrepancy between what you're expecting and sort of what they're offering, the conversation goes downhill from there, right? Where you're asking for more, they're asking for less, and it's very ugly, I suppose is the word. So I think if salary is a critical part, ask at the beginning, after the first round, not like before, not during the initial screening. When they come back and say, hey, we'd like to move forward, I think that's a good time to just be like, hey, humbly, like salary, what's the sort of range here? I just want to make sure that like it matches with what I'm expecting. And then make sure you end it with a compliment. Like, I really love this company. I really want to work here. I just want to make sure on the salary front, I'm, getting the compensation I need to support my family, whatnot. So keep it humble, and make sure you compliment at the end of that statement.
Right. So does it help if if someone who's applying, if they think like a recruiter, if I think that if I'm going to apply for this position, or if I was going to hire, what were the qualities that I would look for? Do you think that sort of kind of thinking helps the candidates?
Yeah, and I mean, empathy is a big part of being successful in any role in life, really. I think the more we can think in each other's shoes and the way that we do things, the more we can sort of be successful. I know when I was at NewsCred, I tried to learn coding just because I was like, I have no idea what these guys do. Like, how do I empathize as the head of HR? What do I know what they're doing if I don't even understand how to code? I've done product management for 3 months. I've done agile coaching. I've gotten certifications just to be able to be like, I understand what your problem is when you're speaking. So definitely, but I think part of that is also the job description, right? We do take time to write the job description, and it's really important that you read and match yourself to the job description. I think I forgot to mention this. Like, one of my biggest pet peeves is if a position says that you need 4 years of experience and fresh graduates are applying. It really bugs me because it just feels like you're not even taking the time to read and understand. And I know I see in this culture more often than not that like we encourage young people to apply for really senior roles. Just know that like if we've asked for 4 years of experience, at best we'll consider 3. Right? And that's because you've done something exceptional to cover up for that 1 year of experience. 0 to 1, like, don't apply. Or if you do, say like, I know I don't meet the criteria in the cover letter, but please keep me in your database. I understand that I don't meet. That will make me be like, okay, he's read it or she's read it. But imni jodi erokom application ashte thake, remember, I have a lot of applications I have to get through, and you've just wasted 15 seconds of my very valuable time by not matching at all. So it will be upsetting, and that might be a way to get into somebody's blacklist, Arki.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground, like chronologically coming up so far. Like right after when we get placed, what are some of the ways a talent can sort of groom themselves up for the long term? Like how can they do better at this job they're in right now?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that's really expected from engineers, despite your age or your experience, is your ability to share knowledge. And just because, in software engineering, there's so much happening. There's just so much to learn. It's endless, right? So one of the best ways is to utilize that demo time. Utilize those, companies will have things like tech talks or weekly demos, or, share what you've learned. Like really participate in those and make it a genuine effort. I've seen a lot of times where one team has sort of done something wrong, and if they had just said that in one of the demos, then another team would have been prevented from making that same mistake, right? But they didn't learn that because it wasn't shared during a talk, right? So sharing that knowledge, especially talking about mistakes and learnings, is really important for software engineers. Most companies, again, will have weekly demos, so participate. Don't think of it as a chore, but more of like a really sure shot way to move up. Another thing that I tell everybody, it's not just tech talent, is be sure to be involved in activities outside of your department. So Lauren, you were passionate about arrange a marathon, get people excited about participating in that marathon. Or say your HR team is organizing, I don't know, an event, a cycling event, participate, right? Being in a company, and when it comes to promotions, everybody has a say, including your HR team, right? In terms of like, is this person really a cultural fit? Will they be a good leader down the line? We're assessing this on a continuous basis. So it's important to know all the stakeholders and be meaningful with them and participate with them, and don't just think jami our engineering team tagbo and that's it, right? Don't live in that shell, Arki. Participate in writing blogs, doing webinars, leading sessions, super important. Young people can do this. Don't get discouraged. It's not something for older people. Just make sure whatever you're doing is meaningful to the audience. And lastly, I think one thing that I see most people being very sort of passive about is their performance management. And they're sort of always just waiting for managers to come and tell them like how they can be better or how they can do better. I think just be active in your performance management. Again, just speaking on empathy, managers have a lot going on too, right? They're managing teams, they're coding, they have leadership meetings, leadership responsibilities, target setting, a lot is going on. So of course, they're concerned about your management and your future and your performance, but be active, go and talk to them when you need help, rather than sitting there and waiting and hoping that, manager to jana uchi, like, it doesn't always work out that way. So I think if you keep on top of these things, everybody loves a sort of team player, somebody who's willing to work with them and be really be part of the organization. Those things really help with long-term growth.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Apu. One thing we often see in our candidates is that they leave places too often, right? If you see that they're hopping from job to job, how do you see this?
Yeah. So I think, like, of course, and you've asked this question because there is a stigma about moving too often, right? Like,
yeah,
I know if I see somebody moving every year, I immediately think there's a problem with the candidate, because a year isn't really a time to have done anything meaningful. And what it means to me is that, when you make a jump from one company to another, you're usually doing that with a salary bump. Even if it's 10K or 20K, you're getting that salary bump to move on. So really, from a recruiter perspective, what it's telling me is that money is very meaningful to you, which it can be. I'm not like passing any judgment. But from a company's perspective, if I'm looking for sustainable growth and I'm looking to really have a team that's long-standing, I can't have a large group of people just moving in and out every year. ramp up korte 6 মাস লাগে. That's the reality, right? Before you're doing any meaningful like coding and contributing to the code base, it's 6 months. So within 6 months, I've spent all this time, and then within 6 months after that, you're leaving, is upsetting, right? It's upsetting for everybody. So job hopping, you know, in the US, what I've seen from statistics, because they have that, is 2 years, 1 year is pretty standard for people. In Bangladesh, from my observation, I've seen it's more like 3 to 4 years, and people have longer tenures. So I do have my expectations set in that way. If I see somebody leaving in 6 months in US companies, that's a red flag for me, because their tenure is usually 2 years. And here, if I see somebody hopping every year, or, you know, every 1.5 years, it's a red flag. I do ask though, but not every recruiter will ask. So unless you've done something really impactful in the organization in the time that you were there, and you said like, hey, I did my part, I did something amazing in those like 1 to 2 years, and I'm ready to move on to the next challenge, it is generally seen as a red flag. Yeah.
Yep, I think this is sort of also, since, you know, at Airwork, we are also dealing with a lot of talent. And I think it's in terms of, you know, if you're switching from job to job, is the next job is adding something significant to your previous role. You know, if you were working with, let's say, building a particular API, and if in the next job you're still building the same API, but the duration is small, you know, these factors come in. And also, this is something very difficult to put in a short resume, that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the answer. So I would, Sam, do you have any other questions?
No, I think we can open the floor for questions. Guys, whoever is in the call, you're free to ask questions. Just type it in the chat box. We'll be answering a few questions before we wrap this up. We'll be done in 10 minutes, I guess. So I was just curious to know how you see a lot of people use icons and graphics. I'm a bit split on that topic. What's your take on that?
On the resume?
Yeah, on the resume.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you see mostly is probably either UI UX designers using a lot of graphics, in which case I'd say good, because I do want to see your sense of like design even in your resume, right? It helps me. I see otherwise a lot of freshers doing that. I don't really see experience like past 2 to 3 years. I don't see a lot of people using icons or things like that. You know, I think for Bangladesh, the exception that I've really learned to make is that not everyone is given that opportunity to learn what a good resume is supposed to be like. And I think the minute, like if you sort of have a bias against aesthetics, which I, you know, really try to avoid, you will lose out on a good candidate, right? USSID, they teach you from high school what a good resume is supposed to look like. You have career counselors there. You have a ton of services that will help you. In Bangladesh, you don't have this. So it's normal for maybe even experienced people not to know what a good resume is supposed to look like. So if you're a good recruiter, you'll try to look through the mess, and you'll try to really understand what they're trying to communicate. Otherwise, you will lose out on something, on a candidate that's really just a hidden gem.
All right. So, Rashid, I think we have a few questions in the pipeline.
Yeah, I would go ahead with one interesting question from Joshim. Said that some recruiters ask about current. I think it's about, you know, about the current, like things that are happening currently around us, right? So some recruiters like to talk about things outside of the job description, and, you know, get a sense of the candidate's idea of the world or views in general. So is that a question that is important?
Are you referring to Jashim's question? I think
Yes.
He's asking about the current CTC, how much they're earning in their current job.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, both questions I think are good questions, because I would generally say, for example, from the HR side, directed questions don't really help. Like, I think questions come out when you talk about a person's life and sort of how their opinions are on different topics that are happening. I'm not unknown to asking those questions. I might not say like what's going on in, Palestine or Ukraine. It wouldn't be controversial topics like that, but I might ask something about, what their position is on, say, CGPA. I might ask them that, because if they're, say, hiring for like an engineer, they're applying for an engineering manager role, I might want to know, do their values align with mine, right? So yeah, I might ask opinions about that. In terms of CTC, Joshinpai, it's, I what I can do is explain why recruiters ask this rather than should they, because companies have different policies, right? So of course they're asking this because if, say you're making 120, it gives them leverage to offer you the lowest salary they can within a range that they have. So each position has a range, and it might be 100 to 150. And 150K BDT. So if a candidate comes in saying 120, I know, of course, from the company's perspective, I'm going to try to offer the least amount, right? Because I have a budget. I have a budget pool. And this year, I'm going to hire 10 people and I've been allocated this amount, X amount of money. And I need to make sure I don't oversee that, because as head of HR, that's, something that I'm being evaluated on is, am I staying within my budget, right? So if you try to understand from that perspective, they will try to get you for the least amount. And that's why they ask. Really good companies will not care what your current is. They will assess you on your skill, and they will have an internal pay structure that, if you're scoring this well, then you will get paid this amount. It's, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have or how much you're currently making. But understand that a lot of companies have budgets. They don't have an elaborate amount of money for salaries. So they will try to sort of make sure they're not overpaying from what you're currently making.
All right. Thank you. So Orko asked, hi, Leonika, put some emphasis on soft skills. What are the best ways to show soft skills on resume? Are bullet points really that good?
No, bullet points are not good. So I think with resume structures, so of course, one of the hardest things to communicate is soft skill. But I will encourage all of you to sort of go and look at my LinkedIn profile. At first, I didn't really want to write, bullet points for the, my sort of achievements in different roles, but I did do it for my current company and my last one. So have a look at how it's written. The objective is not to write, I built an API, right? Like listing job responsibilities or listing like just skills doesn't say anything to me at all. It's better to write a success, what we call a success or achievement statement, which is, say, for example, I built X product and that led to an increase in 30% customer revenue, right? That's impactful when I read it rather than I built this, which means nothing to me really. Yeah, Koretsan, great. I'm happy for you. But if you can tell me the business impact it had, that's meaningful to me, right? Then I'm going to stop and be like, oh, wow, like that's something that she built, plus it was used by the company, plus it got me that revenue. Yeah, I'm definitely talking to this candidate, right? So just to say, soft skills you can bring out in those success statements, but it's really hard. I mean, it's a good question. It's really hard to convey that. That's when you have to do through your phone interview. And if you do write a cover letter, that's the exact place where you would, talk about your soft skills, not so much the resume.
All right. Dura Nibroz Hassan, she asked, a frequently asked question in the interviews is that why did you leave your previous company? So what is the proper way to address this question?
Yeah, so let me explain why we're trying to understand this, right? So of course, like everyone's a drama magnet, right? We want to know if there was some drama in the previous company. But mostly, yes, it is important to know how you parted ways because it will impact how you act with us and how you may leave this company as well, right? So there's a very easy way, I think, to address this if you've, again, if you're, please use your judgment when taking my advice here. If you are talking to a company that is progressive, if you say, I didn't feel like I was a cultural fit there, that is acceptable. If you say this to many Bangladeshi companies, it may not be an acceptable answer because they'll think, oh, you just don't know how to gel with people. But I think, if you followed me on LinkedIn, one of the things I really talk about is company culture here and how toxic it can be. So use your judgment. Honesty is truly the best way to go in most cases, but use your judgment. The most common answer that I hear, which I really like, is that, you weren't being challenged enough in your current role. But just know that, HR people may reference check you. Engineers may reference check you informally through their network. So if they come across information that you did not disclose, like you were terminated or, you misbehaved or you were a toxic person, and they discover that, your application process is done right there. So be honest about it. If you had a difficult time, find the right words to communicate that, but never, ever, ever humiliate or degrade the last company that you worked for, even if it was sort of a really difficult situation to work in. Find the right words to describe that you had a difficult time, you had a hard time adjusting to that company culture, rather than that company was really bad and they didn't do this and they didn't do that. Nobody wants to hear you bad mouthing a company, because kalke you might be doing that about my company, right?
Yeah, so I was actually going to, put some points on those, because Bangladesh, that industry is very small and everyone knows everyone, right? So a brutal honesty might result in burning some bridges. That's a fair challenge there. But on the other hand, what Siam and I often talk about, every person has to be managed a bit differently, because there is not a template that the managers could use. So it could be a failure on both ends, right? But as long as you are communicating it properly and also being respectful to all the parties, right?
Absolutely.
We have, I think, four more questions, but let's just try to power through all of them and give them quick answers. So Abrar had another question, follow-up questions, like some quick tips on writing a good cover letter.
Orko. Abrar Orko. Okay. Because we have another Abrar there.
Okay, so cover letters are secondary. So I'm speaking for myself again. Cover letters are secondary for me. It's more important that you communicate what you need to through the resume. Again, that is the document I'm looking at first. Cover letters are a good place to describe any discrepancies in your resume. So say you had a year gap. I cannot see from the resume why you had that gap year. I need it explained in the cover letter, because that's the next document I will go to be like, oh, why is there a gap here? Or why did she take 5 years to complete her undergraduate degree, right? When it usually takes 4 years. So it's a great place. And most importantly, I think for companies that do put emphasis on the cover letter, see it as a way to sell yourself. It literally is a way for self-bragging, and it's allowed. You don't have to feel ashamed. You don't have to feel embarrassed about, oh, I did these amazing things. That is literally what they want to hear from you in that cover letter. So write a good one, and please make sure you customize it. Again, I cannot emphasize enough that if you're applying to top companies, it's if you've ever wooed a person, it's sort of like that, right? So you need to use those words that will grab their attention and make them want to talk to you more, right? So customize it. Don't just, you can have a template, but customize, use the words that will get them to stop and look at you. So it's really important you do that.
All right. Shumon had one question where he was asking about the problem-solving capacity of fresh graduates and the current platform they look about from problem-solving capacity. What about it in numeric and quality? I think Rashid, you can also sort of chime in on this.
Yeah, I think Rashid, you're perfect to take this one on.
For fresh candidates, one thing we see is that if your university projects are interesting enough, because this is 2022, and then if you do, if you are still making a library management system in PHP in MySQL, that might not be the most exciting one. But if you did the same thing in, using some sort of, crypto platform, maybe that's one. Have a good sort of few good projects in your GitHub. That's the other thing, because that's a very good way to show your coding skills. But I would say this is a mistake that a lot of our, we also in our university lives, we did very mundane projects, repetitive projects. But so if you are challenging enough, or even after that, if you pick up some personal projects and do on those, if you find a very generic problem and find out interesting ways to solve those and reflect those on in your resume, in your GitHub, write a few blogs about those things, how you approach those things. These are the things that will probably set you apart. On that, I think Shumon asked a similar kind of relevant question, is that, how to approach for an entry-level job for internship and entry-level job if we don't have any experience. So it's the same thing, right? Be creative with your resume. Show, if you think about all your peers in the same group, so how do you set yourself kind of apart from those? Like, how are you different? How technically challenging you are, or how excited you get when you get to solve interesting questions?
Yeah, I'll just add on that. I mean, just to put it into perspective, I mean, just consider, you guys, that you are one of possibly millions of people who's graduating that year, if not hundreds of thousands. Your resume may be the exact same as someone else, unless you're putting extra effort to be different. And university projects is definitely like the primary criteria we're looking at when hiring fresh graduates. What have you done and what have you worked on outside of university? Engineering is so much about learning and learning yourself, right? And doing. So if you're not exploratory, if you're not trying new technologies, you're not really being different from anyone else. So I know, like, I met a couple of really cool candidates who have like great YouTube channels. Fourth year, they're doing like awesome content, and it's not like crazy difficult concepts, but they're doing something different. And they have a personality. They're trying to find a way to stand out. It really helps, especially with fresh graduates. Do blogs, do YouTube channels, even simple like coding exercises with people that you've learned. It's a great way to get noticed.
All right. One last question from Abir. Abir asked, what would be your suggestion for business graduates who are looking into cracking jobs in big tech? So, getting into tech job, people are crossing that boundary, right? You can do code in your free time and then get good at it. But often in some job descriptions, the tech, engineering background is mentioned heavily, right? So how to kind of, cross that boundary?
Yeah, I mean, again, like if you're looking to get into a software engineering role, you'll have to sort of compete with all of those people who have done it as a degree, right? And that's difficult. But business degrees, business graduates, a tech company isn't just about engineers. The rest of us do exist. We're not, the highlight, we're not the focus of the company, but product management is a great place to get into for business graduates. Everybody needs to sell. And salespeople in tech companies, especially SaaS products, make a lot of money. They get a huge incentive every time they bag a client. So you can go into sales, you can go into customer support, you can go into finance, you can even go into HR. There's a ton that you can do. Again, a tech company is not just for software engineers. The rest of us do have small roles. So yeah, think about those, but definitely product management is something that's really interesting. There aren't enough sort of qualified people in Bangladesh. So if you can crack that, you're set.
All right.
But how can this, I think he's trying to build up on it. Like if somebody wants to pursue a job in the big tech, let's say a FANG company or something, how do business graduates sort of position themselves from Bangladesh to crack a business oriented role in a big company?
Yeah, I think you really need to study that company and understand sort of like if they even have those entry-level positions and what they're looking for. I think study for a while. I mean, just because you see a vacancy doesn't mean you have to go and apply right then. I've had many people who've interviewed at NewsCred that have said, like, I've been prepping for 2 years because I know this is what NewsCred wants, and I've built up my career with those skill sets over the last 2 years to now be able to interview here. And that's a great way to sort of like land in those big companies, is to develop your skills based on what you know they want. It might not happen at the entry level, but in 2 years, if you're very focused, you can. And if you have the ability to be selective about which companies you join and which roles you take, then make sure you wait for that right role. That's going to give you that experience to land you that like big tech job.
Okay, that's a very good answer. Rashid, I think we're almost out of time. There are 2 questions that still
Okay,
need to be
I
answered.
have one question though. I kind of want. This one is based on, why did you leave your previous job sort of question. Right? So often, you personally probably do a lot of background and reference checking, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I observe within the engineers is that, a lot of the time they don't put their managers, a name on the reference because they don't know how they would respond if you sort of go back and ask them, right? So how do you filter those feedbacks out from those, if someone is being unfair to the candidate if the previous manager is being unfair to the particular candidate you are trying to get a reference from. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I usually do references from 3 people. One would be the manager, one would be a peer, and one would be usually, if it is a manager person, then somebody who reported to them. You can always tell when somebody's being vindictive during a call and when somebody's sort of just being genuine about like wanting to give them feedback. So I think that just comes with experience of doing reference calls and knowing people. It is very easy for, especially if you've left on bad terms with that manager or if you left on bad terms with the company, they may not want to give you that positive reference. I mean, actually, personally, I don't do a lot of reference checks. I do more through the grapevine checks because that's when you really get the right sort of information. If I go to a manager, say you are on really good terms with a manager, সে তো খুব ভালো ভালো কথাই বলবে, right?
Right.
Even if you weren't like a great employee, they're going to say great things about you and you're going to be like, oh, okay, great. So usually, because at least for Bangladesh, because it's so small, we usually go through the grapevine and sort of get that reference check. Outside companies, usually use an external service even to just get the reference check. It's pretty formal. They send a form. People are expected to tell the truth, and they do or they don't. And then, unless there's like a huge red flag raised during the reference check, you got to trust that like 5 or 6 people of value have interviewed this candidate. So almost every aspect of that candidate has been assessed. There are even times when we push candidates into seeing how they might respond to an aggressive situation, right? Just to see, like, are they going to get aggressive? Are they going to get upset? Or are they going to handle it like, professionally? So yeah, we do our part to make sure we're covering all the bases during the interview.
All right, thank you. Shumon asked, Bhaiya, I had a lot of blogs, but it's not related to CS. Is that evaluated? I would kind of take a crack at this. So, blogging is a way to show your passion, right? And engineering, like software engineering in general, it's not always being about very technical either, right? We like to see, are you good at math? Are you good at problem solving? And if you have a different blog, can you translate those things that you learn from a different sectors into an engineering role, right? So yes, if it is something interesting, if you have a new perspective on something that you think is valuable, definitely do add those, right? But the additional things definitely counts. The last question, how to dodge competition while applying for jobs, considering there are usually a lot of applicants for a certain job in the particular job portals, right? So Apu, can you very briefly say the keywords or key points on this one?
Yeah, I'll just take a minute. The clear answer is that you cannot. There's no way of dodging that. But I think more important is the principle of understanding that you should not be in competition with other people. Focus on yourself and compete with yourself to be a better self, right? That's the only way that you're going to get forward. If you're constantly looking back at like, oh, how far has this person come, that's going to, you know, impede your future. So focus less on them, focus more on, hey, I want this job, what can I do to make sure I can get to that? Just drown out the noise of the other people.
All right. Thank you so much, Apu. I think we are over our time. Thank you very much for your time again.
Of course.
So to summarize the, you know, what we have talked about is that the job application is a sort of, it's not very tricky. It helps if you think a bit intuitively and think like, you know, a recruiter, how a recruiter thinks. Apu has added a lot of points on those. Be genuine in your resume, be genuine and honest when you talk, show the key things, be precise when you answer, don't beat around the bush, and probably you're very good to go. And a lot of the time, you know, at the initial stage, it's not about the technical knowledge. So having a good communication skill, having the ability to explain technical things in a bit of non-technical way as well, those things help a lot. That being said, I would like to invite Sam to have closing remarks, and then I think we can end today's session.
I think we're done almost. I'd just like to thank Leonika for this amazing session. We've exceeded our time, meaning it has been very engaging.
Oh.
I learned a lot. I took notes as well. Like this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Apu. We hope to see you back here again sometime in the future. Like I just like to tell to the audience, this whatever we're doing, we're trying to take Bangladeshi talents to the next levels, and these are the kind of content that you should be consuming, and this is what's going to take all of us to the next level. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Have great dreams, and see you guys later.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.